Death is inescapable. If you think otherwise, why then, don't let me stop you.
Hades is an isometric roguelite hack and slash made by the extremely talented developers of Supergiant Games. Supergiant has established a pretty great track record with previous games such as Transistor, Bastion, and Pyre, all of which garnered almost unanimously positive feedback and praise for its stylized visuals and its unique artistic approach. Hades continues the almost trademarkable look for Supergiant's titles, with an art style, voice acting, and combat system, all reminiscent of, albeit matured from, the studio's earlier projects. I'm Rusty, and we're going to take a quick look at Supergiant's new combat-driven dungeon crawler from the pits of Tartarus, Hades. You play as Zagreus, the esteemed prince of the underworld and son of Lord Hades. Zagreus wakes up one day and realizes he's tired of taking his father's shit all the time, journeys outward into the wilderness of hell with reckless abandon, and slices through the underworld's denizens like wet paper. Along the way, you'll receive the charitable aid of Athena, Artemis, Zeus, Ares, and other familiar characters in the Greek pantheon that all want to see you climb your way out of the pits of hell and to the surface of Olympus, where your company will hopefully be a tad more cherished. Although it shares the same distinct visual style and frenetic combat, Hades is very much unlike its predecessors. Hades is, in fact, quite opposite from what we've seen from this developer in the past. It is unforgiving chaos in the most relentless of ways, whereas Transistor and Bastion are slower burns with a sense of excitement through journey and discovery. Hades quite literally throws you into the pits of hell, kicks your ass, and then kicks it again.
Well, time to go get killed again.
Hades manages to be both tantalizing and cathartic at the same time. You can clear a room of demonic monsters and thugs, dodging bullet hellish attacks from everything on the monitor like the acrobat you are, and then in the very next screen, some fat dude with a hammer takes a massive crap on your face and ends your perfect run. Despite it currently being in early access, this is probably one of the most complete and polished early access builds I've seen for a game in a very long time. A steady progression through the pits of Tartarus will unlock a variety of weapons, including blades, bows, spears, shields, and a couple other unused weapon slots that I assume are being reserved for further additions to the game, as it matures through to its final release. You can receive valuable boons and buffs from allies ranging from lightning attacks to curse damage to damage resilience, and a lot of other pretty cool stuff. The upgrade system works pretty well for what it is. It's a simple, straightforward concept that isn't here to impress anyone. You look in a mirror, do some power poses, and journey forward once again to face the hordes of hell with your newly acquired big dick energy. You can tailor your upgrades and attune them to a desired playstyle, such as improving backstab damage, throwing projectiles, or an extra dodge maneuver that you will use to try and dodge one attack by inevitably and super effectively careening yourself into a bastard spike trap. And oh yeah, by the way, there are spike traps. The controls are responsive and very deliberate, dare I say to a fault, actually. I'm still trying to get used to the stiffness of the dash mechanic because it travels just a couple feet shorter than you feel like it should, but I can't fault an early access build for not being absolutely perfect. Any complaints I have with the combat are honestly minor at best, and any problems we're seeing now will probably see a resolve during the course of its active development. Something that really surprised me during my runs through Hades was the abundance of Greek lore and storytelling. And an emphasis on story is not something you usually see from a game that relies on procedural generation like a roguelite. The focus of most of these games centralize around creative ways in which to beat the pulp out of your enemies, but Hades has a surprisingly well-developed story. The courtroom of Hades houses some pretty colorful guests and inhabitants, almost all of which will usually have something of significance to say to you, giving you plenty of opportunities to untangle the unexpectedly intricate lore of Hades. And some of these characters, I've got to say, are way too damn interesting for their own good. You have an anxiety-ridden Gorgon housekeeper that hides her feelings for you about as well as she actually cleans the place, the iconic three-headed dog Cerberus that really doesn't say much but goes out of its way to ensure you of its affection, and an impressively written cast of other characters that will both rally with and conspire against you through your runs. You are given the chance to embolden certain character relationships with Zagreus using ambrosia bottles. Now these trinkets you can gift to other friends and even enemies, and they will usually reciprocate that kindness to you by giving you a nice piece of loot in return. This isn't normally the type of game I would consider to have such an expansive story, but this is Supergiant we're talking about here after all, so truth be told, I'm not as surprised as I am impressed by the lore elements they've managed to pack into this game. The bits of dialogue give you vast insight into the relationships between some of the characters, and with plenty of nods and references to actual Greek mythos tied in there as well, but that's about as much as I can say without spoiling some of the story's key moments, but you get the idea. It's almost sort of a means of incentivizing the player to die just so they can run back to the courtroom of Hades and see what news some of the characters will bring into the story. Pay attention to all of the dialogue you can. I promise it's worth it. As per the Supergiant standard, Hades boasts an intoxicatingly colorful vivacity in its world structure, animations, and especially in its character and level design. The isometric camera view lends itself well to the game's tight, frenetic combat, and despite its procedurally generated nature, I never once felt like things were getting repetitive or boring, and I think a large part of that is due to how satisfying and how complete the visuals in this game really look. If I ever decided to bail out on a run, it's because I was getting frustrated at how poorly I was playing, because some bullshit in the other room managed to take me down to 4 health after my 3rd chamber. The game is also fully aware that its visuals play a pretty integral part to the experience of Hades, because it goes out of its way to give you these really impressively laid out overhead shots of the realms of Tartarus and Asphodel, further enticing the player to kind of appreciate the magnitude of their carnage. At a first glance, the art style of Hades is most immediately comparable to Supergiant's Pyre, I would say. I don't know, a lot of how the animations just play out seem to remind me of how Pyre handled some of its own art, but that's really not to say Hades doesn't do a stellar job differentiating itself from the rest of their earlier projects. Hades reminds me of Supergiant's earlier games in all of the best ways possible. The isometric camera view that made Transistor's appeal so unique, with the combat and destructible environments of Bastion all blended in with Pyre-like visuals, it really does feel like I'm playing a much more evolved project, where all of Supergiant's talent has become more fully actualized. Even in its early access build, the game feels so crisp and really polished, and I'll probably go through a few more runs myself after finishing this review. I'm reluctant to give this a numbered score here, since I don't really think that tells people much about the game, so I will at least conclude this review by saying, buy this game and buy it now. It's not uncommon at all for early access builds to go through a price increase or two during its development, so strike while the iron is hot, so to speak, and don't sleep on this, because I'm really getting the feeling that Hades may well be on the track to being Supergiant's greatest and most evolved title to date. I'm Rusty, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.